Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, we do this every single week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about. There is a new game announced from IV Studios. I actually did know about this one back during Gen Con, I just haven't mentioned it until now. This one is going to be a completely different game than their previous releases because this one is actually going to be a flip and write. This is the first time that IV Studios is getting into this style of game, but it does bring some unique ideas to the table. Something that's neat about this game is that it also incorporates paper where you're going to be scratching in order to reveal whatever is underneath it. Other than that, I think it'll be offering some familiar mechanisms, but I'm really interested in how all of this is tied together because what I'm most excited about is this endorsement from Tom, who's someone that I generally do share tastes with, and he says that this is the best game of its genre, which is really high praise. So if Tom really likes this one, I'm automatically very interested in it, and I think IV Studios has done a fantastic job with all of the games that they've released so far. But if you do want to learn more about this one, I will be going into it in more detail during the week of its launch, which is coming up really soon here because it's actually launching on October 29th. So if you don't want to miss that, feel free to subscribe down below and I will have you covered. I also want to mention that there is a campaign going on right now from a fellow content creator that you might be familiar with. And this, of course, is Mark Maya over from Boardgame Coffee. I've actually hung out with him a few times. He's a really cool guy and he has an awesome sense of humor, which is great to have when you're writing a dark comedy comic book. He actually already released the first and second chapters, and this new campaign is going to be introducing the third and fourth. And this all takes place in a world where vampires and werewolves and killer bunnies all roam rampant, and the main character is trying to adapt to his new way of living. If you're a fan of comic books or you want to support Mark Maya, I just wanted to make a quick mention to this one. And if you're not sure if this is a comic book for you, he does also offer a free preview of the comic book on the campaign page, which I definitely recommend checking out. And I will make sure to link this one in the description down below for anyone who wants to show it some love. Other than that, I do want to give a quick mention to Alex over at Boardgame Co. because him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming campaigns. I do these each and every week, but Alex puts out a video at the start of each month to let you know of the heavy hitters that will be launching for that month. And he did just put out his video for October, so if you do want to check that out, you can head over to his channel, which I'll have linked in the description down below. But if you are looking for even more games, especially those in the historical war game genre, I also want to give a quick mention to Zilla Blitz because he covers the historical war games exclusively, and it's an area that both Alex and I don't cover in nearly as much detail, so if that is a genre you're interested in, he will have you covered for that. And I am filming this one a little bit early to give myself a little bit more time this weekend because we do have Canadian Thanksgiving, so if you are in Canada, I wish you a happy holiday. Hope you have tons of food, and we have a ton of Leafs games to come. So hopefully they're able to make a statement with these first few games, but until then, let's check out the campaigns. And the first campaign we have launches on October 14th, and this one is called Umami Friends, and this one is a competitive battle party card game where players are different umami chefs with different special abilities, but you're essentially going to be trying to get different ingredients in order to craft recipes, which could then give you victory points, special actions, or abilities. But what's cool about this game is that you can actually mix those recipes with more ingredients or even other recipes in order to evolve them into different states, making them more powerful the more that you do this. As I mentioned, each player is going to be starting as a specific umami chef, and this is going to give you a unique ability as well as a starting recipe. Each turn you're going to be drawing ingredient cards that come in 8 different types, and then you can choose whether you want to prep those ingredients by placing them out in front of you or trade in prepped ingredients in order to complete a recipe. There's going to be a bunch of recipes out on display, and if you do have the appropriate ingredients, then you can trade those in order to complete that recipe, which is going to be giving you some sort of ongoing or instant effect. These effects will normally help you or harm your opponents, although that's not always the case. But like I said, you can evolve these ingredients by mixing them with even more ingredients or even other recipes. The different types of recipes you can create come in 4 different types. There are the plant recipes, which will allow you to generate resources or bonus actions. The spicy recipes, which will allow you to attack your opponents. And then there are the burger recipes, which are going to be granting you points for the end of the game. And then there are the rare recipes, which are just going to be giving you some sort of unique ability. The game continues like this, and the player that reaches 30 points first wins the game, and if you do want to check it out, I'll have it linked in the description down below. And this next campaign also launches on the 14th, and this one is called Mutagen, and this one's a competitive worker placement game that's set in a 1920s biopunk universe. Resources have become scarce, but a new element was discovered that harnesses a lot of power, and players are going to be competing for that resource. The way the game works is that each player is going to be starting the game with 4 different types of workers, and what's neat about these workers is that you can use them in order to take various actions out on the different locations out on the board, but depending on which worker you choose to take that action with, it's going to be giving you a different secondary action that is specific to that location. Each player also starts with their own personal player board, which represents their airship, and this is used for a few different things. First of all, you'll be able to store or install resources onto your ship. Your storage is represented by the spaces in the top left corner here. You'll be able to use that in order to hang on to certain resources over multiple turns. But then in the bottom left corner here, this is where you can install resources. Resources can come in different types as well as different colors, and whenever you store a resource into this grid here, it can never be beside another resource of the same type or of the same color. Doing this is really nice because it will score you victory points at the end of each round, but of course it does come at the cost of that resource. The spaces on the right here have more to do with your workers rather than your ship, but this is another really cool aspect of the game because you're going to be able to get all sorts of different upgrade cards throughout the game, and you'll be able to assign those to your workers in order to further customize the different benefits and actions for using those specific workers. What's also cool about this is that these upgrades to your workers are done through biological implants, and the game offers a bunch of little rubber components that you'll actually be able to fix onto your different meeples in order to signify that they have those upgrades. But the game plays over 4 rounds where players are going to be taking turns placing their workers out on the various locations out on the board, and that's going to allow you to gain the action of that location, but then depending on which worker you decide to use, you're going to be getting a specific secondary action related to that location, but then also if you have any upgrades on your worker, then that can also get you some additional benefits. But these different actions are going to allow players to collect or sell different elements or spend those elements in order to complete objective cards, which can grant you with all sorts of different bonuses, but it's also the primary way that you're going to be getting that rare new resource into your supply. But you can also spend elements in order to move up these different element tracks. You're going to be moving up the one that matches that element type. And the further you are ahead on these tracks, the more victory points you're going to be getting at the end of the game. But that special rare new element is especially useful with this next action, which allows you to move up on the progress tracker. And this is essentially a track that has a bunch of different icons and tokens around it, and each time that you pass one of those icons or tokens, you're going to be gaining the associated benefit. What's neat about this is that you're going to be trading in those special elements in order to move up this progress track, and the more that you trade in at a single time, the further you're going to be able to multiply your movement. This means that you have the tough decision of taking this action early in order to get the benefits of it, or to wait and pool your resources together in order to be more efficient with your actions, and just take bigger moves out on that track later, spending more of your resources at once. One of the remaining actions you can also take is to upgrade your airship, which is going to be increasing its capacity, allowing you to hold more resources and have a little bit more flexibility. And I did mention that you can upgrade your workers by getting these various cards, but I didn't mention how you actually get those cards. And the reason for that is because it's not actually done through actions. Instead, at the start of each round, there's going to be a drafting phase where players are going to be drafting these cards and then assigning them to one of their workers. The game continues like this over the 4 rounds, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of that wins the game, and if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And launching on the 15th, we have Crystal Age, which is a semi-cooperative board game that takes place in a fantasy world where a corruption is taking over the land. Players are going to be working together in order to fight back against this corruption, but as the game continues, players can decide individually if they want to try and work against the other players in order to help the corruption and become the Lord of Corruption themselves. This is a game that I did cover in the past, but they pulled it down and they are relaunching it now, but it looks like they made a bunch of improvements to the campaign page since then, so I do recommend having a look at it. But other than that, it looks like the game should be fairly similar to when I originally covered it, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. and this is a fantasy-themed strategy board game that can be played competitively, cooperatively, or even solo. And in this game, each player is going to be controlling one of 4 heroes with the goal of defeating the powerful monsters located at the center of the board. These monsters are known as the Lords of Corruption, and they are really powerful, so you're probably not going to want to go just headfirst into these battles. Instead, you're going to want to level up your characters first, and there are a couple ways to do that. The first is to be visiting the different areas of the board, and the board's broken up into different biomes, with each of the different biomes having different types of creatures that reside there. And of course, you can engage in battle with all these different creatures, but the really cool thing about it is that whenever you defeat a creature, you're actually going to be gaining their abilities by keeping their card and adding it to your hero. But another way that you can level up your character is by completing one of the challenges provided by the Guardians, and these Guardians are different statues that are blocking different areas of the board, and any player can go and try to attempt that challenge, and if you're able to complete that challenge, then you will also be gaining that Guardian's unique power. And in this game, a player's turn is split into 2 phases. There's the movement phase and then the action phase. And during the movement phase, there's 3 types of movements that you can choose from, either the simple movement that moves you 1 space, the jog that moves you 2 spaces, or the sprint that moves you 3 spaces. The other difference between these is that the more spaces you move, the more of a penalty that you'll get. And it's in the action phase where players will be able to use their abilities and attack the different creatures and monsters. And to do this, players will be rolling dice and then comparing those results to the monster's health and armor points. But then players will also be able to use their different abilities that they've gained throughout the game to manipulate those dice, heal themselves, or do other actions to turn the battle in their favor. And in order to win the game, if you're playing solo or cooperative, you need to defeat as many of those Lords of Corruption as there are players. But if you're in the competitive mode, it is the last player standing who wins the game, and players can fight each other as well. As always, if you want to know more, I have links in the description below. And also launching on the 15th, we have Ministry of the Lost Things, Lint Condition. And this one is a cooperative puzzle-solving game. And this is coming from a publisher that has a lot of experience in this space because they created many other puzzle-solving games already, including the Morrison Game Factory, as well as the Emerald Flame. But in this one, players are playing as scouts for the Ministry of the Lost Things, and this is an organization that explores different realms and dimensions in order to return items mistakenly taken from our world. The game plays over 4 different chapters that should take just over 2 hours to play, and throughout these chapters, players are going to be collecting different letters, maps, documents, witness statements, as well as chapter-specific components in order to find these missing items and reunite them with their companions. This, of course, brings balance back to the realm, preventing any negative consequences in the time-space continuum. But this is also a game that's designed to just jump right in. The game provides instructions as you play it, and it also uses a themed web portal in order for players to validate their findings or get different clues or hints if they happen to get stuck. And of course, just like their previous releases, this is going to provide some really nice artwork in order to give you that full whimsical experience. If you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also on the 15th, we have the next campaign from Allplay, which is going to be offering you 4 different games, and these are Ruins, Oddlands, Vegas Strip, as well as Money. And I'll just go through these in that same order. So the first one we have is Ruins, and this one is a card shedding game where the first person to get rid of all their cards is going to be the one to win the game. And something that is unique about this game, which maybe isn't such a surprise since this is designed by John D. Clare, is that this one does use card crafting, where you're going to be layering transparent cards over each other within a sleeve in order to upgrade and customize your cards. The game plays over a series of turns, where on your turn you're going to be able to upgrade one of your cards and then play that card. These upgrades can stack significantly, creating some very powerful cards. It also says here that you'll be able to claim 1 card the entire game, which I think means that you're going to have a limited amount of times that you'll be able to upgrade cards before you end up shedding them or getting rid of them. But there will be 1 card that you'll be able to continually upgrade and rely on and make a lot more powerful than any of the other cards that you might have in your hand. But the player that's able to get rid of all their cards first wins the game. Also offered in this campaign, we have Oddland, which is a competitive game where players are going to be documenting fantastical creatures on an island, and there's going to be a bunch of different creatures out on display, which is going to dictate the different ways that you can score victory points in this game, and these are all shared by all the different players. The way the game works is that each player has a hand of terrain cards that's going to feature 4 squares of different types of terrain. And on your turn, you'll be able to put one of those cards into play, either putting it adjacent to the existing tiles or even covering a portion of them. Once you've done that, you're going to be placing one of your tokens onto the card that you just played, trying to position it in order to score as much victory points as possible. These tokens are going to be scoring based on their surroundings, looking at the different terrain around them, or maybe what's in their row or column, or even where other tokens are positioned around them. At the end of your turn, you're going to be drawing a new map tile into your hand to replace the one that you just played. And then the game continues like this until each player has spent all of their tokens. And then at that point, you're going to be adding up all the victory points, and the player with the most wins the game. And the next game offered here is called Vegas Strip, and unfortunately I don't have a picture of the components for this one, but this one is a bluffing game where players are going to be taking turns playing money tokens out to different casinos out in the main play area, but players are not allowed to put more than 2 tiles on a single casino. Once all the tiles have been placed, they're then all going to be revealed, and then you're going to be going through each of the casinos, and whoever played the most amount of money at that casino actually loses all of their bet, whereas all the other players are going to be getting points equal to the amount that they put there. But the catch here is that some of the casinos are actually corrupt, and whoever plays the most at those casinos is going to be getting 10 points, whereas everyone else there is going to be getting nothing. Every player starts the game knowing where one of these corrupt casinos are, but you're going to have to try to deduce where you think the other ones are based on how many tokens the other players are putting there. The game also offers 20 unique casino power cards, which is going to add variety from game to game depending on which ones show up, but players will be able to take advantage of those and work them into their strategy in order to try and win the game. And the last game offered in this campaign is one that I do have more information on, because this one is actually a refreshed Reiner Knizia game called Money. And this one is also a competitive game where there's going to be different amounts of money of different currencies, and players are going to be starting with some money plus a bluff card. At the start of the game, there's going to be 2 stacks of money randomly dealt, and then players are going to be simultaneously bidding for those stacks, playing their cards face down in front of them, and then simultaneously revealing. And this is where this game becomes really cool, because the player that played the highest bid gets first dibs on exchanging their cards with any of the groups of cards out on the table. This means that they could exchange them for any of these 2 stacks that were put out on display, but they could also choose to trade them with any of the other players if those players happen to play cards that that player really wants. And this is why it's really nice to go first, because you're going to have a lot more options than the other players. But the round continues like this, going through each player in decreasing order of their bid, with each of them swapping their cards with any of the cards still out on the table. And what players are trying to do here is to collect money of the same currency, because you're going to be scoring each of the different currencies individually. In order to even get any points, you need to have at least $100 of that currency, and then any amount of dollars after that 100, you'll be able to score as victory points at the end of the game, unless you're able to get over $200 in a currency, and in that case, you get points from all your cards. If you're able to get 3 of a kind, which means 3 cards of the same value and of the same currency, that's also going to grant you a bonus. And then there are also some coin cards that are just worth a flat 10 points for each one that you're able to collect. But the game continues like this until that main deck runs out, and then the player with the most points at that point in the game wins the game. And if you do want to check these out, I will have them linked in the description down below. And while we're on the topic of Reiner Knizia games, the next campaign we have is supposed to be launching this month. I think it's probably going to launch on the 15th, but this one is for the secret epic big box Reiner Knizia game. And that's mostly all the information I have on this, other than they do have a few clues on the campaign itself. And if we look closer into these, there is a lot of references to space, as well as Lord of the Rings. And I have no idea how those two fit together, but they do have the word factions here beside Lord of the Rings, so I assume there's going to be some sort of houses or alliances that are involved in this game. And then there is also this little detail that says El Dorado in space, so I don't know if this is going to be a spin-off of one of Reiner Knizia's most famous and loved games. That would definitely be a big announcement, but I'm really just taking a shot in the dark here. I have no other information. I don't have anything else behind the scenes. But there's no escaping Reiner Knizia. He has made quite an impression on the industry, and he's one of my favorite designers, so I am definitely interested in this. And if you are too, you can go ahead and follow along, and I'll have a link to the campaign in the description down below. Also on the 15th, we have City of the Big Shoulders, and this one is a Euro game where players are going to be using worker placement, but the game also has a little economy of its own because players are going to be buying shares in different companies, and if you buy enough shares in a company, you'll actually be able to take ownership of that company, creating a little engine where you can manufacture different types of goods, which you can then sell in order to raise the value of that company. This is a game that I thought was going to launch a few weeks back, and it's one that I am personally very interested in, so I'm definitely going to be checking this one out when it does launch. They don't have a Kickstarter page up at the time of me filming this, so if you are interested in this one, you're going to have to sign up on their website. But if you do want to learn more about how the game actually plays and the finer details, I did already cover this one, and I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now. This one is actually a Euro game where players are going to be buying and starting different companies and then purchasing shares in those companies and taking actions for the ones that they own in order to try and raise that share price to exchange those shares for the most money at the end of the game. And I know I probably made that sound way more complicated than it is because I don't think this is going to be a difficult game to table, but I think it is bringing in some unique ideas, and for those reasons, this one is my own personal pick of the week. But before I jump into how exactly a round plays in this game, I first want to explain a little bit about how the companies work, because there's a bunch of different companies offered in this game, and each one's going to have its ownership broken down into different cards. There's going to be one card representing 30% ownership, another representing 20% ownership, and then you're going to have 5 cards representing 10% ownership. But whoever does hold the 30% ownership card of a given company is going to be the owner of that company, and you'll be able to take the actions of that company during the action phase, and each player does start with a company at the start of the game. And this is a game that plays over 5 different rounds where players are going to be buying and selling shares, both in existing companies as well as new startups. In order to start up a company, all you got to do is purchase that 30% share card, and you do get to choose what you want to pay for that card, but that's going to be essentially setting the starting value of that company, and it will be reflected in its share price. But to start a round, players are going to be placing out different building tiles, and players are always going to have 3 of these in their hand throughout the entirety of the game. Players start with 3, and then you're always going to be placing 1 every round, and then choosing 1 to discard and 1 to hang on to, and then drawing back up to 3 at the start of the next round. But whenever you place these tiles, you're going to be placing them on your specific track in the center of the board. And what's really neat about this, and one of the reasons that it is my own personal pick of the week, is that the tiles that the players choose to put out actually become the action locations that players can use throughout the remainder of the game. This means that it's the players who have control as to which actions become available. This means that players could choose to just put tiles that are only useful to themselves, but you might want to put something that is useful to the other players, because anytime that another player uses your action location, you're going to be getting some sort of benefit. But players are going to be using these locations to take various actions for the different companies that they own in order to do things like hire workers or buy raw materials in order to feed into your company in order to generate their goods. And there are ways that you can automate this in order to increase your goods production. But there's also actions that allow you to hire managers for your company in order to trigger your company's bonus effect, and these can all be very different depending on the company. And you can also hire salespeople in order to increase the value of your products. When you produce goods, you're going to be producing a good of a particular type, and there's going to be 4 different types that you can produce, and there's going to be a row of cards associated with each of these. These cards represent the demand for that specific product, and anytime that you produce it, you're going to be putting tokens on that specific row. Based on the value of your product and how many you're able to produce, you're going to be able to gain that amount of income. But if you're able to fill up any of these cards while doing so, you're also going to gain some bonus income. This is why it's nice to own multiple companies and be able to produce different types of goods, because you might want to time that appropriately to try and trigger filling up as many of those cards as possible. But like I said, whenever you do this, you're going to be gaining the amount of money from the goods sold, as well as any bonuses from filling those cards. Then this gives the owner of that company the option to either keep that money within the company or to pay it out to each of the shareholders. And of course, this is going to be paid out proportionally depending on how much ownership each of the players own in that company. And this is one of the reasons that players might want to buy shares in their opponent's company if they think that that company is going to be paying out a large sum of cash in the immediate future. But another thing that's really nice about choosing to pay out to your shareholders is that anytime that you do this, if you're able to pay out an amount that's higher than your current share price, then this is going to be increasing the value of your shares. You will be selling out of all your shares at the end of the game, and it is the player with the most money that wins, so trying to get your shares value as high as possible is a really important goal. But getting back to the actions, there are some companies that do have these squares located on them that indicate that you can place an asset tile on them. And And the way that the asset tiles work is that they're going to be giving that company both a short and long-term benefit, often allowing you easier access to some of the resources that you might need to generate products, or some sort of benefit when you go to sell them. One of those benefits might be to move your token up the appeal track, which will gain you all sorts of other bonuses as you move up that track, and there are other actions that you can perform to do this as well. But at the end of the round, you're going to be going through a bit of a cleanup phase, and then you're going to be playing through 4 more rounds, and the player who has the most money at the end of the 5th round wins the game. If you are interested to check this one out, I will have a link to their website in the description below, and of course you can sign up to get notified once this one launches. Also on the 15th, we have the Magnus Protocol Mysteries, and this one is another cooperative puzzle-solving game, but this one does lean more into the horror and supernatural, as players are trying to solve 3 different cases, examining different written documents, photographs, and audio recordings. Each of these mysteries is going to come with its own box with all the evidence that you need in order to discover the truth of that specific mystery. If you want to learn more, I will have this one linked in the description below. And also on the 15th, we have the Holiday Hijinks collection, which is a whole collection of different puzzle-solving games that you can play with your friends in order to solve all the different mysteries. And what's cool about this is that they are themed for all sorts of different holidays, and there's 3 more that they've just added to the collection, which is the Leprechaun Larceny, the New Year Nightmare, and the Krampus Caper. These are really nice because you can bust them out on those specific holidays if you have friends or families that might enjoy solving these mysteries. And it looks like each of these are just made up of 18 cards that offer you the different puzzles, but there will also be an app and website that will help you facilitate this. If all that sounds interesting to you, you can find a link to it in the description down below. And also on the 15th, we have Empire Builder Europe, which is a train game where players are actually going to be building out the rails by drawing lines between different dots on a map. And then players, of course, are going to be trying to make different deliveries of different goods by using those rail systems. Players are going to be expanding their networks, linking major cities, and adjusting based on market demands. And the further of a distance you travel for a delivery, the more rewards you're going to be getting. But of course, it is at the cost of more time. So players are going to have to balance if they want to make that investment for those bigger rewards, or if they want to make more frequent, smaller deliveries for a more consistent and frequent payout. I didn't have a whole lot of info on this one as I was prepping for the video, but I did just notice as I was filming this that it states here that this is a reimplementation of the game Eurorails, and it's going to be given the deluxe treatment. And I did also just notice it does say this on the BGG page as well, but I did take a quick look through the BGG page and the videos, and there's not a whole lot of info here either, or on YouTube itself. So if you do want to learn more about this one, probably your best bet is to check out the campaign. But if you are already a fan of this game, you can look forward to this newer version. But either case, I will have it linked down below. And also launching on the 15th, we have ZeroDay.exe, and this one is a cyberpunk cooperative deck-building dungeon crawler where players are fighting to reclaim the city. Each player is going to be playing as a unique character that's going to have their own stats and abilities, but then each session you're going to have a randomized operation where you're going to be completing operation-specific objectives like downloading hacks, attacking enemy AI robots, scavenging parts, and then using those to build mods and items. Once the operation objectives are complete, it's going to be followed by another randomized boss operation. But each round, players are going to be playing cards in order to determine your initiative order, and you're going to be drawing a card for each enemy, and the lower initiative dictates who is going to be going first. This, of course, allows you to throw the first punch, but it can also cause your enemies to become more aware of you because there's a chance that threat can be generated, and if enough threat is generated, it can actually upgrade your enemies, making them more difficult to overcome. But then each character is going to be taking their turns according to that initiative order, and for the enemies, they're going to be moving and attacking based on their card. But then for each player's turn, they're going to have a number of movement points that can be used at any point during their turn, but the first thing that they're going to do is gain 1 shift. This is a special resource that you'll be able to spend in order to manipulate your tiles on your board in order to activate cards. This is a primary mechanism in the game because one of your actions is to actually play a card to the top of your board, and each one of these cards is going to have a pattern of icons ranging from 1 to 3 icons, and in order for that card to activate, the tiles on your board need to match that same pattern. This is why it's nice to have that shift resource to get those tokens in the proper order that you need. But like I said, players are going to be able to move up to their movement points at any point throughout their turn, which means that you can split it up, and you can also use your skills that are not on cooldown for free, but then you're also going to be getting 2 action points that you can spend to perform some various actions. The first action is the one that I just mentioned, where you'll be able to play cards onto your board, and each card's going to have that pattern of tiles, and you're going to be trying to match that with the tiles on your board. But the thing is, when a card gets activated this way, it's actually going to be flipping those tiles over, creating a new pattern, which could also chain into other cards getting activated. As you play these cards to the top of your board, they're going to be moving 1 space over to the right each and every round, and once a card falls off the board, you're going to be getting it back into your hand. But you can also use those action points to heal yourself or adjust those tiles without using shift, or even to access an adjacent terminal in order to boost your stats out on the board. And of course, you can use those actions to attack enemies that are in your line of sight. What's neat about the combat in this game is that each character is going to be dealing either cyber damage or physical damage, and each enemy is going to have a different resistance to one type of damage. Combat is deterministic in this game, meaning that you're just going to be comparing your damage output to their defense, and then they're going to be taking damage equal to the difference. And when you do defeat an enemy, you're going to be gaining parts which you can use for different upgrades. One of those will allow you to upgrade your skills and character cards, while another is going to allow you to build permanent cybernetic enhancements that you can equip to any of your characters. And then another is going to allow you to build powerful one-use items. And then the final type is a wild that you can just use for any one of those 3 that I just mentioned. But when you gain that one, it also gains you threat. Something else that's neat about your cards is that rather than playing them onto your board, you can just hang onto them, and each one of these cards is going to have a secondary action that you can use when it's not your turn in order to help the other players, either by defending them, adding additional damage to enemies, or manipulating enemy movement. Like I mentioned, this is a deck building game, and one of the ways that you're going to be building your deck is at the start of each round. Each player is going to be drawing 3 cards and choosing one to add into their deck, and then also all players are going to be drawing up to their hand limit. But the rounds continue like this until players complete their operations, and if this one does sound interesting to you, you can go ahead and check it out, and I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 15th, we have Reef Ruins, but this is also going to be including a new expansion for their previous game, which was Wicked and Wise, but I'll let you know how Reef Ruins plays first. Reef Ruins is a competitive roll and write where you're going to be rolling 3 dice and then using those to take your actions. The 3 dice represent the 3 heads of your Hydra, and one of those heads wants to search shipwrecks for treasure, while one wants to communicate with the otters here in order to send them out to go find pearls to bring back to you. Well, the 3rd head wants to enchant your treasure in order to make it worth even more victory points at the end of the game. At the start of the game, players are going to be choosing ship ruins, enchantments, and reef sheets, and then everyone's going to compete to unearth the most valuable items. When you choose to spend a die to visit the ship ruins, this is going to work similarly to Sudoku, where you're going to be trying to get different sums of values in the different rows and columns, but there will be some other twists and requirements depending on which ship you decide to visit. The reef bonus works different, where you're going to be spending a valued die in order to cross off that specific location, but the only way you can reach that location is through orthogonal movement, so not only do you need the right value, but you can also only move adjacent to a space that you've already crossed off. I'm not entirely sure how the enchantment sheet works, but if I were to guess, I think you're going to be generating resources from the other 2 sheets, and then combining them over here in order to multiply your victory points. Not a whole lot of info on this one, but if it does look interesting to you, I will have it linked in the description down below. There's also going to be a new expansion for Wicked and Wise in this campaign, and this is the Reflections expansion. And this is going to be adding a new type of basic card into the game that's going to give you a lot of flexibility with the way that you can play it, giving you some new strategies that you can take advantage of. Then there's also going to be some new gold cards and treasure cards that you can just mix into the game. And these treasures are going to be focused on manipulating your cards when you win or lose tricks to make your goals easier to reach, hopefully. If you're not familiar with the original game, I did cover it in the past, so I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now, but if you want to check out any of this, I will have a link to this campaign in the description down below. And in this game, players can have one of 2 roles. You can either be a dragon, where your role is to play the actual trick-taking game, or you can be a mouse, where your role is to be partnered with one of the dragons, and you're going to be playing cards to manipulate the trick-taking game to your team's benefit. Cards in this game have 2 purposes. The top of the card has a suit and a number that you'll be using for your trick-taking portion of the game, and then the bottom of the card has a special ability that the player playing the mouse uses to try and manipulate the game. The game plays over 3 rounds, and each team is going to be competing for tricks, treasures, and coins, but this game is less about winning the tricks and more about completing goals. Treasure cards allow players to perform some special actions to help their team or sabotage their opponent. Doing all this well will net you coins, and the team with the most coins at the end of the game wins the game. Also on the 5th, we have Age of the Moon, and this one is a competitive strategy game where players are going to be trying to equip rockets with different resources on Earth, and then send those rockets into space to be the first to successfully build a lunar base on the moon. Players start the game with some resources and some negotiation cards, and you'll be able to use those cards throughout the game in order to make different deals with the other players. But players are going to be spending their resources in order to purchase different assets and rockets in order to send those assets to the moon. And then each player is going to be rolling dice to see if their mission succeeds, and if their rocket successfully gets to the moon, you'll be able to place your assets onto your moon base, expanding its functionality. Players will then gain resources from any of their functional deployed assets, although depending on the architecture of your assets, there may also be some costs involved as well. Each player is then going to be drawing an event card and reading it out loud, which can cause some game-changing effects. And the rounds continue like this until one player is able to complete their moon base first, and then that player wins the game. And if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. Also on the 15th, we have the Knitting Circle, and this one is the standalone sequel to the game Calico, although this game does play quite a bit different than that. But this one is a competitive game where players are going to be drafting different tiles and then using those to complete different garments by creating certain sets. Each player starts with a player board as well as some starting buttons, which are going to be dictating the color, pattern, and type of garments that you'll want to create. There's also a shared rondel in the middle of the table where each player is going to have a cat of their color. You're going to be moving your cat around that rondel in order to draft different colors and patterns of yarn. And I should mention that this one is our Discord pick of the week, which is no surprise after seeing how popular Calico has been, and this one looks like a really fun addition to the series. This is a game that plays over a series of rounds where at the start of each round, players are going to be taking turns moving their cats around the rondel in order to draft different colored yarn tiles. These tiles are also double-sided, with each side representing a different type of stitch, and the way that you draft it is the way that it remains. You're not allowed to flip the tile after you've drafted it. This continues until each player has 4 pieces of yarn, and then players will be able to simultaneously perform their actions. You can spend a yarn in order to gain a matching color garment card, and the garment cards are basically your objectives, which are going to be dictating the type of sets that you're going to want to collect onto that card, and it's also going to be granting you with some amount of victory points, and also possibly some instant benefits. Whenever you perform this action to trade in a tile to gain one of these, you will be able to draw 2 of these and then pick one. And if you really want to flip one of your yarn tiles over to the other side because you really need that other stitch, there is an action that allows you to do that, but you do have to spend a yarn tile in order to do this, so it does come at a significant cost. Players might also find themselves with these paw tokens, which you can gain through those instant bonuses that I mentioned earlier. And if you do have any of those, you can just spend them at any point in order to get any color and stitch of tile that you want. So these are really nice tokens to have. But then, of course, there is an action that allows you to finish a garment, and in order to do this, you don't actually need to have your garment fully completed, because you're just going to be getting the amount of victory points dictated by how far you were able to get down that garment card. A nice thing about finishing these cards is that when you do decide to do that, you'll then be able to put up to 3 different buttons onto that garment to finish it off, and each garment can only have 1 button of each shape, and each one of these buttons is going to dictate the type of garment, the color, or the patterns that are needed in order to put that button on it. But the game continues like this over a series of rounds, and then at the end of the game, the player with the most victory points from all their knitted garments is going to be the one to win the game. And if you do already own the original Calico game, this also does come with a mini expansion for it, so if you're interested in that, you might want to check this out as well. But I will have a link to this campaign in the description below, and of course you can click to get notified. And also on the 15th, we have Tomten, and this one is a Christmas-themed game where you're going to be moving along a Christmas calendar, trying to complete objectives that are going to be scoring at different points along that calendar. I should mention that I am going to be showing you the pictures from BGG here, but it looks like the game might actually look a little bit different than those, so just keep that in mind as I go through this campaign. But like I said, this one is played on a Christmas calendar, which is what this board here represents. and turn order is going to be determined by whichever player is furthest behind. At the start of the game, all players are going to be rolling 4 dice, and then there's going to be 4 task cards drawn that all players are going to be competing to complete. Each of these has 3 different objectives of varying difficulty, and the more difficult ones will grant you more victory points, but also whoever's able to finish the final objective on any of these cards will also get to take that card into their possession, which can score them additional victory points. Each objective is going to have a value on it. They're going to have to match exactly by summing up the values of the dice that you contribute to that card. And on the right here, you can see how many victory points doing that will grant you. But then in the middle here, you have a moon with a value in it, and that's how many spaces it's going to push you forward on the calendar. As I mentioned, if you completed the final objective on that card, then you're also going to be taking that card into your possession. But if you're not able to complete any of these objectives, or if you just don't want to at this point, you can also choose to, instead of completing one of those, move 1 day ahead on the calendar in order to draw and reroll 3 new dice that you're also going to be adding to your dice pool. It's not shown on the image here, but there's also going to be a die in this leftmost column of each week, and whoever is the first to reach the start of a week is going to be getting that die added to their supply for free. This is nice because it incentivizes you to move forward, but also you don't want to move forward too quickly because you want to try and collect as many of these cards as possible, because each one of these is going to have a particular icon on them. And when you pass over the different holidays that match that icon, you're going to be scoring points for the amount of those cards that you have. If you're playing in the advanced mode, each one of these cards also grants you a special ability. But the game continues like this over a series of rounds until all the players reach the end of the board, and then the player with the most victory points at that point in time wins the game. And launching on the 16th, we have Ion Core, which is a game that I couldn't find a whole lot of info on, but this one is a sandbox game that takes place in a dystopian future where humanity was driven to piracy. Players are each going to be sailing a ship across a dystopian sea filled with all sorts of hazards and monsters. And it also looks like each player is going to have their own character with a bunch of different spaces for different upgrades and storage, and also the ability to form different allegiances. I can't say for sure how the combat works in this game, but if I was to guess, it looks like it's done through simultaneous reveal of different cards, either against other players or against different aspects of the game. Like I said, not a whole lot of info on this one, but if you do want to check it out, I will have it linked in the description down below. And on the 17th, we have another game that I didn't have too much information on, but this is for Moonlight Brewers Triple Fermentation. But this is a game where players are going to be taking turns performing one of 5 available actions. You can either move, gather ingredients, equip different items, hunt werewolves, or attack other monks. You can choose if you want to do a simple action or a diligent action, with the simple one getting you lower quality items, but the more diligent one generating noise and also requires rolling for a skill check. Players can augment their dice rolls by drinking beer, but this does come at the risk of becoming clumsier and noisier further in the game. The reason this is bad is because noise can attract werewolves, which are more than happy to attack you, but I don't really have too much more info on this one, so if you do want to check it out, I will have it linked down below. And launching on the 17th, we have The Souls, and this one is a game that can be played solo, cooperatively, or competitively in order to complete their personal or scenario objectives. Players are each going to be choosing a character with unique attributes and skills in order to gather resources, craft items, and engage in combat against various enemies. On a round, each player is going to be taking 3 actions per turn, such as exploration, resource gathering, or crafting or combat. But then it moves into the enemy's turn where they get to activate and take their actions. But this is a game that also includes non-player characters and different neutral entities. And then there's going to be a turn for each of them. Being neutral doesn't necessarily mean that they're friendly, so you do still want to be careful around them. But at the end of each round, there's a survival element where players have to eat in order to maintain their vitality and also not suffer negative consequences. The game continues like this as players are trying to complete those objectives, and if they're able to do so, then they win the game, and you can check this one out. I'll have it linked down below. And that's everything for this week, but don't leave yet because we still have some awesome giveaways to announce. And the first one we have is for a pledge for Shape Invaders, which looks like a really fun dexterity game where each player is going to have a fleet of ships. You have a few different types of ships that you can use for blocking or attacking your opponent with, but if you're able to knock them out of the play area, then they are going to be eliminated from the game. And a cool feature with this game is that each of the components are designed in such a way that they do light up if you have the appropriate lighting. And the campaign does also include a tabletopper, and it has UV light strips in it that will light up your play area in all sorts of different colors. This giveaway is going to be for the Shape Invaders Arena Edition, which is going to get you a copy of the game, as well as a barrier so that you don't have to go ahead and pick up all the pieces off the floor if you happen to flick them out of play. And I already know that next week's going to be a massive week, so I'm going to run all these over on the Discord just to make my life a little bit easier since it gets automatically drawn instead of me having to draw them. You can find a link to the Discord in the description down below. And the next giveaway we have is for the Echo of the Predator, which looks like a really fun and unique game that actually uses this digital board. And no, it doesn't use an app. Everything is pre-programmed into this board, but depending on the decisions of the players, you can have all sorts of different outcomes, and this game's going to have a little story that unfolds depending on the successes, failures, and decisions of the players. I'm a big fan of this retro feel where the game board kind of seems like an electrical board, and it also does double as an onboard computer because players have just woken up from cryostasis upon a ship, and the onboard computer is going to be dictating the current state to the players and presenting them with their different options. Unfortunately for you, there's also a deadly alien on board the ship, and players are trying to reach the escape pods in order to survive this encounter. But of course, you do need to have the appropriate supplies in order to actually survive the escape pod as well. So there are a bunch of different endings depending on how well all the players are able to survive. Gather the things they need, find different weapons, go up against that alien, and then hopefully leave the ship, and potentially finding a way to eliminate that alien so it doesn't harm anyone else in the future. And this giveaway is going to be for the pledge that gets you this board. You'll just have to provide your own speaker. And to enter this giveaway, same thing, just head over to the Discord and click the emoji underneath that giveaway. And finally, we have a giveaway for Dragon vs. Kingdom, which looks like a really fun pass and write game where each player is going to have their own sheet of paper that they're going to be building different houses and different towers on. But every turn, you're going to be passing your sheet to the player next to you. When you have your own sheet of paper in front of you, you're going to be acting as the dragon, using your actions to move around and destroy whatever you can in order to earn victory points. But when you have anyone else's sheet, you're going to be fighting back against the dragon, building towers and different structures in order to score victory points that way, with each of the buildings scoring a little bit differently. This one is a print and play, but this pledge is extra nice because it's actually going to get you a print and play version of this game as well as their 3 previously released games. And to enter this giveaway and all the others, just head over to the Discord. And I did add all these giveaways separately because each one is only available to certain regions, so just make sure that you're entering in the giveaways that will ship to your area. But if you are watching this early enough, there might still be time for you to enter in last week's giveaway, which has 4 more games that you could potentially win. And as I mentioned, there's a link down below where you can find all these. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners from last week's giveaway. And we had a pledge for Vrahode, the Age of Prophecy, as well as Sibille, a tarot board game. And a draw winner, I use this fancy application here. And I haven't added in any extra entries yet because I want to draw Vrahode only from the YouTube comments because this one is only offered in North America. And if I include the Ko-fi members, there's a good chance I'm going to draw someone who's not from North America. So until I improve that process a little bit, which I am hoping to do over December, it's better that I just exclude it just this one time. So I've added in the hashtag here, so let's go ahead and draw the winner. And the winner is Franco PDX, who says, thanks again for another week of crowdfunding previews. You're welcome, and that he's hoping to attend the Level Up Retreat again next year. That's awesome, and I hope to see you there, and feel free to give me a nudge if you want to beat me at any specific games. Now let's go ahead and draw for Sibille, and I've added the extra entries here, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, these are extra entries for my supporters over on Ko-fi. I do all this content for free, which is why I'm able to cover all games, whether they're big or small, and it's the supporters on Ko-fi that make all of this possible. And they are a big reason why I've been able to continue to do this for so long and grow the channel to the point now where I am able to do this many giveaways. So this is just a little way that I like to show my appreciation, but let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner of Sibille is Bond35, who is one of our members over on Ko-fi. So I'll reach out to you and let you know that you want a sweet pledge here, but feel free to email me at adam@shelfclutter.com or just message me on Ko-fi and we'll get that all sorted out for you. And that is everything for this week. And in case you're wondering, I did film this over multiple days. During the first day, the Leafs were playing against the Canadiens, and they lost. But today they played against the New Jersey Devils and won 4-2. But this is a board game channel, so I'll try not to talk about too much sports. So until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full. Happy Thanksgiving to all my Canadian viewers out there.